Thank you all for clicking on this video. I am White Mojo Wolf and I want to give you my random thoughts after completing the main story of Metaphor ReFantazio after 80 hours of gameplay. I feel like this video needs a few essential parts to tie everything together, which I know ironically makes the random part of the title a bit misleading. But first I'll provide a bit of background in terms of the type of games I've been playing leading up to Metaphor. Then I'm going to deep dive into my random thoughts about various aspects of the game. Then finally I'll tell you where I would place this game among the others I played. Before we get any further into the video, if you like this content, want to see more of this format in the video, YouTube gives you many different ways to engage with my channel. Feel free to like the video, comment your thoughts, or subscribe to make sure you get to see more videos. So Metaphor is considered an Atlas game by the internet forums, Discord servers, and subreddits I like to read in my spare time. In most years I would not play one of these games, however, I would watch one of these games get released and see positive discussions about the game and continued recommendations as time went on. A key game that comes to mind is Persona 3 Reload. So around this time last year, Atlas and Sega released a remake of Persona 3. P3, we'll call it, was originally made for PlayStation 2. Over the years, as more Persona games were developed, the graphics got better and the gameplay features got more evolved and fleshed out. So it was decided to bring all these lessons in development made after Persona 5 and breathe some new life into their older games. Coincidentally, Xbox needed a major day one release early in 2024, so they paid whatever money was needed, and I'm sure it wasn't cheap, to give the gamers with Game Pass day one access to Persona 3 Reload. It's still on there if you wish to give that game a try, by the way. Months went by, and I entered a mental block with gaming in 2024. I would play games, but I couldn't engage with them on a higher level mentally. In other words, I was going through the motions. In fact, I was doing that with many other forms of entertainment I typically lean on during tough times. In order to break the spell, so to speak, I always decided to try something new. Luckily, Persona 3 Reload was on the list. The reason it made my list in the first place is because I saw some footage for this game called Metaphor ReFantazio during one of the Summer Game Festival streams. I thought it looked like an interesting fantasy setting. However, I wanted to familiarize myself with some of the older games that were made by Atlas and Studio Zero prior to potentially looking into Metaphor, because normally those games aren't my cup of tea. This past summer, for the better part of a month, I spent over 30 hours playing Persona 3 and understanding its game mechanics. I enjoyed the dungeon crawling. I enjoyed some of the social aspects. I enjoyed the turn-based combat. However, I wasn't too engaged with the high school setting. I'm past 30 years old. I really do not miss that era. What Persona 3 ended up doing, though, was making me anticipate Metaphor. And once the free demo released for the console, I immediately downloaded it. By the way, if you want to see what Metaphor is all about, the free demo is still available in either the PlayStation Store or Microsoft Store. You can play the prologue, and your progress will carry over to the main game if you wish to buy it later. I feel like more games should embrace this formula because Metaphor is the second game I tried for free and ended up buying, the first being Final Fantasy 16. So let's start with the demo. I found the premise of the story to be quite interesting. Essentially, the old king was murdered by a man named Luis, as he makes a power play for the throne. Also, the young prince that was to be the heir of the throne had a curse placed upon him, to where he's locked up into an endless slumber, ultimately set up to die. This left Luis with no opposition. Then the game introduces you to the protagonist as well as his fairy companion, Gallica. They know the prince is still alive in their quest to break the prince's curse before the powers that be appoint Luis to the throne over the entire land. You know, that paragraph sounded better when I wrote it than when I'm reading it, but let's continue. Basically what I'm trying to say is like, the protagonist and Gallica, they're trying to stop Luis from taking the throne. That's the whole quest. That's the point. I don't know why I worded it that way. Let's continue. I don't want to get into spoilers because the journey along the way, with its twists and turns, was a fun ride indeed, and I don't want to ruin that for anybody. I played the initial dungeon that the demo provides and enjoyed the experience quite a bit. I'm a bit of a sucker for a good dungeon crawler. I didn't finish the demo before I bought the game because I got busy with work, and it kind of happened the game went on sale late November to a price point that, I was comfortable spending, so went ahead and got the physical copy. Speaking of which, I absolutely love how colorful and busy the cover art for this game is. In fact, it's quite reflected in the art style of the game itself once you boot it up. With this art style, I feel like the game in turn performs quite well on the PlayStation 5 and the Series X, and I'm sure PC. It's not trying to be realistic with the graphics, so I feel like it's not as taxing on the consoles, and you don't have to have like the best of the best computer cards to run the damn thing. Not to mention, I found the loading screens were fast and the user interface is very snappy. In terms of the gameplay loop, it's turn-based combat kind of game. So when you're fighting monsters close or past your character level, you're in a duel where you can spend your turns using items to your aid, attacking, defending, and etc. Then the enemy gets a turn and they can attack or buff themselves up for future turns. You gotta think of games like Pokemon and like some of the older Final Fantasies for a good, a good idea on the combat. One aspect that I did enjoy is that for me, I tend to kill everything and do every quest, which leads me to overlevel past the intended target for a certain level. So when I'm going through a dungeon that's a bit on the easier side, you don't even engage in turn-based combat, usually until the final boss. The game understands you're going to win the battle, so they just let you attack the enemy with a sword or staff or spell in real time, as well as dodge their attacks. More like an action game, so you don't really get bogged down during your adventure, and I really like that. And I feel like the game kind of respects your effort and your time in that regard. You can always do turn-based combat for anything because you'll have the ability to squat up, but you're over-leveled. Just hack the son of a bitch and just move on. That's how I kind of see it. So back to the gameplay loop though. As the story unfolds, they give you specific deadlines to achieve the next step of the story. One example I'll use is an early game scenario. After some of the first events at the main capital city unfold, you're tasked with the deadline of going into the cathedral and obtaining the royal scepter from a bad person. The game gives you X amount of days in between, let's say 20 because I can't remember at the moment. So each day, you can basically do two activities. A day activity and a night activity. These activities involve dungeon crawling and questing, or doing dialogue-based events with your party members and building your bond with them. As you grow your bond, you get more archetypes and abilities you can use for battle. Also, you cannot increase your relationship with the character further until your character learns some traits that he'll need to be an effective leader. These include courage, wisdom, imagination, eloquence, and tolerance. Thankfully, you can also do activities around the town to increase those 5 stats. For example, you'll need level 5 courage to wrap up one of the party members' storyline toward the end of the game. Metaphor is a dialogue heavy, and in some cases, I'm not a fan of that. If you want me to be engaged with the dialogue, then you have to weave a good story, and Metaphor does this fantastically. So you might as well have an interactive story among its traits as a game. Don't misunderstand it as like a Baldur's Gate type of game, because there isn't really much choice that can lead to many forks in the road, so to speak. No, it's more like Fallout 4's dialogue choices, where you can say things in different ways, but it ultimately leads to the same outcome. Without spoiling, I thought the story had a lot of drama, a lot of commentary on how societies can fall apart, but also commentary on how to build themselves back up. Ideally, building yourself up and then radiating that outward to your party and then radiating that outward to the world at large. It also accepts that nothing is perfect, but it's just the fact to try to be your best. So at the rolling of the credits, I was completely satisfied with the 80 hours I spent on this game. For me, the main takeaway from my playthrough of Metaphor is that this is the second time as of recently that I have played a game at the perfect time in my life. The first was Final Fantasy XVI earlier this year. Metaphor in particular was a fantastic journey I could enjoy in 2-hour sessions. It allowed the story to breathe and allowed me to learn its systems and set up my characters effectively. The story is about fantasy and hope, magic. It all might sound corny, but at the same time, if you're playing this game at the right time, it just clicks. I think considering all of this in mind, if I were to score the game today, I'd seriously give it a 9 out of 10 just straight up. For me personally, I'd go a step further and put this game in the ever-evolving list of great games I've played all time. The top 10 might be pushing it because once you trim that list down to 10, it gets very crowded. But I can easily see this game being in the top 20 for me. It's not Baldur's Gate 3 in terms of the game, but it shares a lot of parallels with Baldur's Gate 3 with how I was in a rut and wanted to try something new. And I got taken on this incredible journey and had a positive experience when it was all said and done. With many games, I'll be playing the main campaign and get to a point where I'm just going through the motions just to see how it all plays out. With Metaphor, however, that wasn't exactly the case. Instead, I would just keep playing and just know one of these 2-hour sessions would be my last. And I'd be stuck looking for the next game to play. I'm at that point now, so I'll end the video here, then I'll return after I play another game. Goodbye for now.